This is Lulworth Cove, or Durdle Door, Lulworth Cove, part 2. And once this has dried, which it has, I'd like to try and create the conditions to be able to paint on a granulation effect. And what helps that is to seal the paper. So I'm going to give this an underpainting layer of diluted yellow ochre, and the gum arabic content, I think, in the watercolour should just make a little difference to the paper surface and the way it receives colour, and that will help granulation. So I'm using soft natural fibre brush, and this is diluted ochre. Raw sienna might be better, but yellow ochre is good too. Carefully up to that edge. There are some areas of slightly pinker ochre colour. But in the tradition of watercolour painting, generally you can make it darker. It's difficult to make it lighter. So by starting with the lightest colour, I'm hoping that this will provide a good base for the subsequent layers. So most of this part of the cliff is in shadow, but there are some rocks that aren't in shadow. Perhaps some of that should have a little hint of pink in it from crimson. I'm going to just put a little bit of pinker colour into that. Over there. Using the brush at different angles, so I'm going to try and use just the point of the brush to draw along this rocky edge. Then diluted ochre again, back to that, this sort of door, the door in Durdle Door. Bring that down, so this is sunlit part here. This will be in shadow a bit later, so that should help the illusion of this being slightly three-dimensional, or more three-dimensional. It's important to dilute the yellow ochre for this. So this paper has had lifting out. This is much lighter on this edge, so it's much brighter here. I'll leave a little bit of paper. So while that's still damp, I'll come back with a flat brush. Just push that back from that edge. I like a trace of ochre in that, but a bit for this edge to be considerably lighter. So you could press down with a kitchen roll, it might be effective. So I'll never get rid of all of that. It's just a soft edge with the ochre. Same thing there. The beach I would divide into zones, so there are different colours of sand. Some sand is a lot darker, but the initial layer, I think, would be a combination of just yellow ochre, very very dilute yellow ochre along this edge. Some lines there, and then a gap, then perhaps a little more ochre. So the tide, the sea and the tide have produced slightly varied colours of sand, or what appear to be slightly varied colours of sand, with warmer ochre, I think particularly nearer. There's more crimson in the ochre, and there's a sort of banding of these colours, because this area of sand is really there's quite a lot of this, and I'm going to try and describe it in a way that is informative, visual. So I'm going to try granulation on the sand, and that means underpainting to start with. I think if we get that to work, it's just a little hint of greyer sand, slightly bluer sand in fact. Might have a trace of violet in it. That's ultramarine and a little bit of crimson. At this stage this is blurring, so it's wet into wet, but the next layer I think should be more wet on dry, so I can differentiate these zones a little bit more. So it's got a hint of violet about it. And this edge, this will be darker, considerably darker here. So all that has caused the paper to buckle upwards. I'm now going to leave that till it's 100% dry. Best to leave it to dry naturally.